I feel like it's just a great feeling to know that you're producing something that people love.
Recently, there's been a lot of trends, especially in baking.
When you said I wanted to focus on doing one thing really well, and I think that that's hard for a lot of people.
He was like, "What about Glory Hole?" And I was like, "What?"
You're like,
Because
yep.
we're just a bunch of goofballs in the kitchen.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to get right into it because we have a very special guest, a very inspiring business owner. If you guys live in or around the Toronto area, you've definitely heard of Glory Hole Donuts. They are an award-winning donut shop founded in 2012. The ingredients in all of their donuts are amazing. My favorite flavor is Ferrero Rocher, and we're really excited to get into it today with the founder, Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Guys, hi. Thanks for having me. I'm
No
really
problem.
honored to be on.
Thanks for being here. Okay, we want to get right into it. So basically the reason why I wanted to interview you, Sam said you're a very successful business owner, Glory Hole. I think everybody knows Glory Hole Donuts. And the mission that we kind of want to get on our podcast is bridging the gap with successful business owners like yourself, how you got there and where you started. Because I feel like sometimes that gap is missing in a lot of people's stories. And we just want to be real, transparent, raw with our audience. I feel like you'll have a very interesting story and we can't wait to hear it. So just a little bit of like a premise as to kind of our mission. Before we get started, do you want to introduce yourself, a little bit about you?
I'm Ashley Jacko. And I've been working in the food industry since I was 16, and I started out as a barista, and here I am today. It's a bit of a long story, but it's been an interesting ride for sure. And I just love it. I love the food industry. I love how it builds community, and it's been great. It's been wild.
Awesome. And I feel like working in the food industry, like you said, it brings people together too, that sense of community. Like everyone just loves food, especially like good food. And I feel like it's just a great feeling to know that you're producing something that people love, which is awesome. I want to get into a little bit of obviously the story behind Glory Hole. That name sparks kind of curiosity when you first hear it. You're like, oh, Glory Hole, wow, okay. And that's good because people it's like that brand recognition and people are like automatically interested to know what Glory Hole Donuts is. So can you give us a bit of maybe a backstory on why it's called Glory Hole, the name, and kind of how it like represents your brand or how you want people to see the donut shop?
Back when I was sort of developing the idea, my husband actually is an art director in advertising. And so, we sort of creatively connect and we kind of mirror each other that way. And so one night, funny enough, in bed, we were like, we're playing off each other, like, what names, what could we do? Like, what should we do? And the first thought that I had actually was sort of gearing it towards like Canadiana or like just like Ontario. So we had come up with some names at first and they just weren't resonating with me. And then I started to think about my career as a back of house person, so working in kitchens in Toronto. And we're a bit of an oddball bunch, to put it too simply. And so my husband and I kind of, or he was like, what about Glory Hole? And I was like, what? Yes. Because we're just a bunch of goofballs in the kitchen. And so I really wanted it to be fun and kind of representative of who we are in the kitchen. And so it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. I honestly, in the beginning, it got a lot of people enjoyed it and got it and thought it was funny, but there was a huge crowd that really didn't get it and were really appalled. And I genuinely didn't think about that. Being a young 26-year-old woman, I just thought it was funny. And so, I just stuck with it. And here we are.
I love that. I do want to, because you're saying you guys were playing off the name, like in the very beginning, I guess, stages of building the business. How did the idea to open a donut shop actually come to light? Like, I know there's a lot of people out there, especially a lot of people who listen to this podcast, who they're either like working a 9 to 5 or they work in the service industry or wherever they work, but it's not ultimately where they want to be forever. And they have aspirations to start their own business, whether it's product or service based. And it's kind of just like you don't know where to start. Like, where does that story start from for you?
Well, as a kid, I always knew I wanted to own a restaurant or a food business. So that's first thing. And donuts specifically, I've just always really loved. I actually don't have a big sweet tooth, believe it or not.
No.
And so I find, I mean, obviously donuts can be very sweet, but I like the fact that it's dough as well, which tends to be a little bit less sweet. So I just always associated it with childhood and going to donut shops. And when I was kind of deep in the thick of my career, I definitely knew I didn't want to work for somebody else for 12 hours a day for, I don't know, basically $7 an hour.
Yeah.
So that was number one. And I always knew it when I went to culinary school, that if I had done something on my own, that I wanted to do one thing really well. So I sort of went off of that. And I just remember one service working at Buka, and we were making donuts for service. And if anyone knows the method of making donuts, it's kind of scary making them, especially during service, because it's like fast paced and it's like you gotta it's really wild. But it was so amazing and I loved it, and everybody loves a donut. So it was sort of kind of an offshoot from that service, combined with the notion that I knew I wanted to do one thing really well, and kind of hone in on that skill.
And when you were in that transition, how did you prepare for it? Not only like physically, obviously, but also mentally and emotionally, because I feel like a lot of people, even with us with the podcast, you go into something and I automatically think of the failure of what's going to come, or like, what if I don't? Yeah, that's a bad trait probably. But like, I think of what if it doesn't work out? What if, I don't make it through? So I guess it seems like you're very confident. So how did you get that mindset of like, this is going to work and this is going to be successful from, working a 9 to 5 or from working in the restaurant industry?
I guess I mean, like, everybody has those doubts, and that's totally fair. But I guess I just was so fed up with working in the industry, in the environments that I had been working in, for the hours, for the pay, that I just sort of had this unbelievable confidence. I was like, well, either this is going to fail or I just move on to something else. So there was never, I just didn't have any doubts. And I think the other factor was I was very young. Like when from the idea up until I actually did the build, I was 25, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was still pretty young. And I think there's a fiercelessness with kind of a younger age. And so I just went for it. There was really nothing to lose. I literally had nothing to lose. So I started off small, and I started doing sort of, wholesale. I found this really odd, unique shared kitchen space. And I was like, this is $500 a month, which is unheard of. You would never find that anywhere. And I just went with it, and it just happened that way. And I think
started rolling out
there
from
was
there.
no mental blockage. It was just like, go.
That's honestly inspiring too, because one of my questions specifically is like, honestly, personally, something you said really sparked something in me too, is when you said I wanted to focus on doing one thing really well. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. So like, kudos to you for being able to do that. Cause right now, at least in this current environment in society, it's like you have so much access to everything. You can do so many things. And I feel like a lot of us, and I don't want to speak for you, but me at least, like I'm trying to tackle so many different like things all at once that like none of them ever really fully take off. And I always try and like hone in, like for example, the podcast, really honing in and like doing better in it and actually making it go somewhere. So I like how you said that. Like that's a really good tidbit of inspo, you know?
Also, I feel like with our generation, like Sam said, everyone has their hands in like different things. Everyone wants, it's like the hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
It's like you got to hustle so hard, but like hustling in different things in case one doesn't work out. You got social media on the side in case that doesn't work out.
Yep.
You got this on the side. Then maybe like you're half-assing everything that you're doing and not really going full force into it.
Yeah.
And also like your passion fueled that confidence, right? You were so passionate about it and that's what made you want to succeed. And we had another actually business owner on and she baked and she said that like you have to be almost really crazy for something to work. Like delusional kind of.
She was like, I was Delulu the whole time. I just went for it. I quit my job that like it used to be her dream job. And she was like, I realized
F
it
it,
wasn't
yeah.
and fuck it. Yeah. So that's
Totally. It is a bit of a like delusion. Like you just really and honestly, bakers, the hours that we have to work, we are kind of a unique breed of people. Like,
Yeah, I can't even imagine
know?
that. Like,
it's like baking all night. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
do you try what you like? Do you try what you bake? Obviously, right? Or you say
I
you
mean,
have a
yes,
sweet tooth,
I
but
definitely do.
yeah,
I would just
It's so
be eating
funny.
it
I
all the
know.
time.
I remember in the early days and I was testing things out at home and I lived with my husband at the time. I mean,
Mhm.
I still do. But and so I would be baking these racks and racks of donuts and he would be asleep
Wow.
and I would literally nudge him and put a donut in his
Try
face
my donut.
and be like, just try it. And it was that for a couple of months.
The
Oh,
whole house just smelling like donuts. I'd love that.
I would
It's
have
my
loved that.
dream.
Getting woken up to a donut.
Yeah.
I want to ask, like, if you're comfortable sharing, like, it would be nice to know, transparency-wise, what the hardest thing or, like, the most challenging thing for you was that you faced when you initially kind of made the sleep and started. Or maybe you made the sleep and you saw that it started working out. What was a challenge that you faced and then ultimately overcame?
Honestly, I mean, being a woman and trying to build my business, and it's so funny because going back to that thing I mentioned about kind of fearlessness and being young, and I really didn't think of that as a factor because again, I was just sort of like gung ho about doing it, passionate. I knew it was going to work.
Yeah.
And I wasn't thinking of those factors. And I was like a little punk kid, so I didn't I wasn't thinking about that. But yeah, definitely when I started really seriously about it and building the shop and that those were some pretty big challenges that obviously as a woman in my industry, in any industry, we face on a daily basis anyway. But these ones were more severe in that it was my idea, my livelihood, all of me going into this.
It's
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
So that was a huge factor. And then I guess the other part that was really challenging, and it took me many, many years to sort of get into the groove, is being the boss and understanding that regardless of the kind of relationships or the kind of community that I build within my shops, I am still recognized as the boss. And it will just always be that way. So it wasn't the same as working in a kitchen with my back of house family. It was a completely different experience that way. So that was really challenging for me. Yeah.
So as in managing people and like you're the go-to as opposed to like you waiting for direction from other people, like you're the one like giving all the direction?
It wasn't the managerial aspect. It's more that I couldn't be buddy with people anymore. Like I didn't have colleagues to make jokes with, or I didn't like that separation. You have to put up boundaries and you have to
It's a boundary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you? I was going to say sometimes when I'm not a boss, but I mean like even with the podcast, I just kind of always come back to this. I get sometimes imposter syndrome. I guess it's kind of not maybe what you're speaking of, but for example, when we first started, when I'm talking to the camera or I'm posting something or I'm building a relationship with partnerships or a community, like I got that imposter syndrome, like kind of who am I to be doing this? Like kind of who am I to like be putting up a boundary with people or to be kind of in like my boss persona or boss vibe, because I'm usually not like that. I'm a very kind of free-spirited person. Like you said, I like to have those relationships, not to take myself too seriously. I don't want people to take me too seriously, but wrapping that back to being a woman, like sometimes you need to kind of put your foot down and make that boundary. And that's also something I struggle with is like we all often talk about having that imposter syndrome and how to kind of like get out of that mindset and to just know who you are and know that you're, you have to be the boss that comes with the company or your business.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
No,
that's
100%.
definitely like a struggle that anyone has. And I think that just comes in waves. I think that's just always a bit of a challenge in the background, when you're going through a hurdle. And yeah, so I've definitely experienced that for sure.
Yeah.
Less and less as the years have gone on.
Yeah,
I've
you
gained a
grow
lot
the
of
confidence.
knowledge but yeah, it's really hard that way for sure.
Speaking of like growing that knowledge and all of that and creating community, Toronto's obviously a very big city with a lot of diverse like foods and restaurants and shops. So how do you maintain that loyal customer base that you do have, and like how what was your idea behind, or how do you keep that creativity going to stand out in a city like Toronto, which you evidently do. A lot of people have heard of Glory Hole. So how do you continue to do that?
Honestly, we always go back to iconic or vintage desserts, and
Mm,
pair that into our creations. But I really do try to just stick to what I want to do, or collaboratively what we want to do in the shop.
mm,
And I really try hard not to look at other brands
mm.
just because there's so much going on all the time. Recently there's been a lot of trends, especially in baking.
Mm.
The cookie croissant, the flat croissant, like just so many. And
The
so I've
cruffin.
Yeah.
sort of jokingly have been putting that on the platform and just like not making fun of it. Like there's a reason it's there, and it's all good. But I just try to stay away from that stuff almost, and just
Mhm.
focus on the things we're good at
Mm-hmm.
and continue to turn out really great customer service, and really getting to know your community and your customer base, right?
Mhm.
Like when we have repeat customers, I mean, it genuinely means a lot to us. Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
they're making the business succeed along with staff, of course, but them coming in is ultimately creating success, right? So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you need to be grateful and genuinely
Mm.
show that. Be authentic about it, you
Yeah. I was
know?
just gonna say, just do what you're good at and stick to that, and not look at like you said, like when I go on TikTok, there's so many new things like croffles and waffles and
No, I was gonna say
donut holes and this and that. I'm like,
the cruffin. I've been seeing the
The
cruffin
cruffin.
what's a cruffin?
everywhere. I think it's a croissant muffin, right?
Yeah,
I think.
basically, yes. Yeah, yeah.
I think
And
so.
it's not
It
to
looks
say that
good.
it's like it's delicious. It's
Yeah.
amazing. And I love the creativity about it. Like it's great. And we've done a couple of those things, but it's just like it's churning out all these things all the time. And it's too much.
It's almost like when you think about like branding or market or social media marketing, like it's almost like trends are supposed to be something that are unique, like, oh, it's a new trend. But like now trends are starting to be like, if you're hopping on a trend, you're almost like the opposite of unique. You're not being unique at all. By not hopping on the trend, you're like original, you're
Yeah.
sticking to what you know. You know what, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Trends are more like fads nowadays. They kind of like once everyone goes on it, it's like off. It's like gone. It's not a thing anymore
It's gone like
Like
in a
that.
second. Yeah.
like if someone says you're trendy, you're like, oh, I'm trendy. Like, I
My
don't know.
basic.
Yeah, like, am I basic? I don't know.
Yeah. But that's a
Um,
good piece of advice. Just be authentic and stick to what you know.
I did want to ask something that's kind of random, but something that like we've talked about quite a bit on the podcast and that I personally have been working on is just like implementing daily habits that kind of contribute to like my personal development or being the person that I want to be. So, for example, I never read books before because I was just like, I don't have time to read books. Like I don't want to read books. Like I'll just listen. But I started reading books this past year and I just feel more sharp. I feel like I can recite things I've learned from the books to people. That's just an example. But as a business owner, as somebody who's busy and like you're running a business and you have a household, do you have any of these habits that you implement on the day to day that are either non-negotiable or that directly contribute to your success?
So yes, absolutely. Um I have like a meditation practice.
Love that.
That's
Love
like a
meditating.
pretty absolute thing. It doesn't even have to be a long session. It is just even 5 minutes. Doesn't matter how
Mm.
long.
Love that.
So that's really important for me. I also do a lot of journaling. I'm really into the mind body connection.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I am having big feelings or a challenging day, I do write it out
Yeah.
because it's release,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so those two things are really important. And then I do work out. I'm pretty I I work
Regimented
out
with
quite
it.
often.
I love
I just
that.
signed up
No,
for a half marathon and haven't trained at
oh,
all. And it's in
Nice.
a month. So
do you do yoga?
it's so funny because I do meditate, but I can't. I have done yoga and I
Yeah.
do it, but it's not my favorite thing. I don't know what it
Oh, okay.
is. I
I
don't
just
know.
asked because I recently like just randomly love it. I feel like it's like I
Yeah,
tell
you literally
everybody.
tell it all the time.
I know. I just like tell everyone like do yoga. Um, no, but that's amazing. I do think like working out too, like regimentally, is like so important for your mind. Like, yeah, you're doing something for your body, but like I think you're just like creating such a release in your mind and like mental clarity too coming out of it.
Yeah.
Like
And
it's
I'm a sober person too, so it's
mm,
like it's I need I don't want to say it's a drug and I'm not addicted or anything like that, but I need something to
it's like a
kind
little bit of
of,
dopamine. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
you
no,
know.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Going back to the donuts
Donuts.
first. Is
Sorry, I
donuts for
don't.
no, that was a really good question because I feel like everyone needs something to like calm them down and have a wind down time
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
rest and relaxation is obviously important. You spoke a bit about like the process of making the donuts in the back end, how it's like hectic and crazy. I actually didn't know that. I thought,
No, she said that that was only at Buka when they had like the service,
Well,
oh,
it's
but it's
still
not.
hectic. No, no,
Oh, it
it's
still is.
still
Okay, okay, okay.
it's
Got
still
you.
difficult.
yeah, just
Got you.
not like that, but it's
I'm
still
like thinking it's like a.
Well, actually, I saw donuts aren't pretzels, but I saw this lady making pretzels. She was like so like like mystically like putting the pretzel in like a thing and putting it down, and then she started doing it like this. I'm like, oh my god, that like that looks crazy. Anyways, I kind of want to talk a bit about the creative process behind it. How do you come up with your flavors? Is it just something you're like, this would be good together? Is it a lot of experimenting? And then to piggyback off that, what are some of your favorites, and what do you feel like Toronto loves from Glory Hole Donuts?
Okay, good questions. Okay, so creatively, it's just honestly going back to iconic desserts. We definitely pair a lot of iconic desserts and do that kind of thing. Um, we also some of our better creations or unique creations come purely out of just utilizing things that we have on hand that aren't
Hmm,
getting used up.
hmm.
So it's like,
Interesting.
we're just being weird and creative that way.
Yeah.
That almost
Um,
like forces the creativity too, though, right?
yeah, it's
Like it
like
facilitates. Yeah.
yeah, like you really have to kind of work your brain into like, oh, okay, like I've got some I don't know, I've got some pistachios and I've got some tahini. What are we gonna do? Like it's
Mm,
just yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
yeah.
really creative that way. Um and then like I worked on the line in kitchens. I only came into pastry and chocolate later in my career. So I actually like to kind of dabble in doing some savory stuff like using herbs in the dough and um,
Mm.
things like that. So that's pretty cool that way. And then definitely my favorite donuts are the more simple donuts. I even like just a plain glazed donut, yeast raised.
Yum.
You know, I'm kind of a simple gal that way.
Yeah.
Like a cinnamon sugar, honestly, it's so
Oh, I
good.
my God, that
love
sounds so
cinnamon
good.
sugar. So good.
People though would literally kill us if we took Ferrero Rocher off the menu.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's
That's
definitely probably the answer to what's the most popular in Toronto. Like
Yeah.
that one, I
Yeah.
see it all the time. Yeah.
That's a good flavor.
Okay, last question is just if you have any, I think you gave a lot of good advice this whole episode, but just a tidbit of general advice for the listeners, people who are aspiring to start their own businesses or people who just want to like start something of their own and kind of get out of that rat race, that hustle culture. What would your closing piece of advice be?
Just be authentic, just be yourself, right? And looking at, you know, closed doors as not so much a negative but a positive or a blessing, if you will. You know, it's always
That's a good one.
everything leads to the highest positive outcome, always.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you go through leads to that. So just
Mhm.
trusting in that. And then don't let your ego get in the way. Let your space or whatever you want to create be a collaborative space.
Mm.
Um
That's a good one.
yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of the time, like you can be a barrier, like you can be a
Mhm.
barrier to yourself, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a very good one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Alrighty, well, want to wrap this up?
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. You gave some great advice. I know our listeners are going to love this. And stay tuned, listeners, because we are
So we
doing
may
something.
take you along with us to
We're doing
Glory
something
Hole
exciting
Donuts.
with Glory Hole Donuts. So she will be back.
Definitely go check out Glory Hole Donuts in Toronto. And again, thank you, Ashley, so much for coming on. And like, subscribe, and do all of that. Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.